Hey Foundations and Art, welcome back to our mini still life draw along. Okay, we are working on this lovely glass bottle today. Now remember, you'll need to visit your Canvas page, okay, and get your reference video, right? Closest thing we could try to figure to an actual still life being in front of you. Okay, so find your reference video and get that up and playing on your laptop. Now mine's obviously going to be off to the side here so that you can see my drawing work as it happens, okay? But I'll be pulling the laptop in and on every now and then to show you kind of what I'm observing and what I'm drawing. So the first thing I'm going to be starting with are our middle values, believe it or not. I know we usually start with our darkest values, but when I look at our drawing, our darkest values are really in these cast shadows. And the bottle, when you look at the total value range of it, really is in the lighter value range, right? It's not super dark. So, right, we're gonna keep everything middle to start with, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna work up some of these darker value shapes and go in and use our eraser to draw in some of our lighter tones and our highlights. Okay, so let's get started. You're gonna need, gather your supplies here. You're gonna need a regular number 2 pencil. I've got my ebony here and ready. I don't think I'm gonna need it on the bottle quite yet. You're gonna need eraser. I'm gonna bring this a little bit over to the side further here so I'm nice and centered. Okay, you're gonna need your eraser, blending stump, need eraser, sharpener. Probably right now don't need your shade guard, right? Because we don't have a lot of shading work happening on here, but certainly after we shade this bottle, you'll want to have a piece of paper towel, a piece of scrap paper, or something to rest your hand on as you shade so you don't smudge your beautiful drawing work. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to start with the neck of the bottle. And the first thing I'm looking for, so I'm going to be looking for these middle value shapes that I see happening in the neck. And we want to go for detail on this. Glasses, actually, no, I'm going to switch this over. I'm going to switch sides, keep that in front of me. There we go. Glass is tricky for a couple reasons because it's reflective and also transparent. Okay, you end up with some really complex form shadow shapes. Remember, form shadows are shadows that fall on the object, okay, as opposed to a cast shadow, which is an object or a shadow cast by the object. So right now I'm using just like a 3 pressure, right? If we think of 5 as our hardest, 3 somewhere in the middle. Okay. I'm just lightening up some of my outline work. 3's in the middle, and then 1, 2 is our lightest. So I'm working with like a 3 to a 2 to start with. Gathering all these different kind of middle value shapes I see happening through the top of this bottle. Then I'm going to work my way down the neck, looking for the same. And where I have any of those fabric lines cutting right through the glass, I'm just going to shade right over them for now. We'll worry about them a little bit later. And I'm just following the shape of the form shadow that I see. I'm also taking time to shade around any bright white highlights or really light areas. Now I can always go in and cut those back in with the eraser, but right now I'm just taking time to shade around them. And I see a lot of middle value happening down the neck of this bottle. Remember, it is a curved object, so we're going to be shading these forms so they work with the curve of the bottle. And just like with all of our other draw-alongs, drawing, careful observational drawing, I should say, takes, well, any drawing really, takes just time and focus. You know, you don't want to have like the TV on or lots of other distractions. You want to just be doing your really careful observation of what you see those value shapes being. And again, it's medium pressure. You know, I'm not pressing hard on the pencil at all. So nice, gentle, even pressure right in the middle. And I'm gonna bring that right up the side. Okay. And then as I come down to the shoulder of the bottles, boy, does this get really light or what? This is like all light value. So I'm gonna switch my pencil pressure now to just like, whew, the absolute lightest value I can get. So I'm gonna be doing like a 1 pressure on this pencil, and I'm still shading with the form. I'm gonna put a little tone in there because it's not quite as bright white as our highlights, but you can definitely see that it's distinctively lighter. And this is another nice case where you want to shade with the form. It like curves out and then comes down. Kind of curve, shading stroke over those shoulders of the bottle. Tilting my pencil. Push that back out of the way. Just going to shuffle some of my drawing supplies so they're not quite all in my way there. Again, really, really light pressure. This is like that 1. This is like, it could even be at like a 0. This is where you're barely putting any pressure on the pencil. Light, 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 super light. Really controlling that value. Excellent. Okay. And now, as I work down into the body of the bottle, I'm going to start observing again more of these kind of middle values that we see happening. Middles and darker middles, we'll say. Keep that off to the side, tilted at me so I can see. Just carefully observing the shape that those values really take. You're really looking for careful observation. What shape do those form shadows take? And don't worry about the darkest ones yet. We're keeping it at that nice like 3 pressure. We'll come back to bring in some heavier pressure after we get the middles in and do some smudging. Just looking at the different shapes these form shadows take, where I see light value, where I see middle and dark value. But again, you don't want to use heavy pressure here because your glass is definitely lighter tone. Right? It's not the same deep, rich, heavy value as like, let's say your, your cast shadows. And what's really fun, and also sometimes I think frustrating for some students about glass, is that you get all these wacky reflections and highlights and all sorts of, you know, fun, yes, difficult, but still fun stuff to draw. I can see this kind of light table shape that comes in and around. So in this section, I'm just going to sketch out where I see that kind of wacky table reflection I see in the bottle. And then shade my middles around it. I want to leave that lighter for what I see happening there. Ooh, so much detail. That's part of the fun, is so much of this detail. Now, everyone has different approaches to how they tackle drawing detail like this. You know, in this case, I like to start with kind of figuring out those middle values. Others like to go in and actually draw out all of these form shadows as contour shape, go back and ghost the lines, and then use that as their guide as they are shading. I mean, you absolutely could do that too. Here we're being a little bit more free with it as we shade and figure out those different values. And really take your time. You know, if you find yourself getting frustrated as you're drawing, it's okay to take a little bit of a break on it, right? And then come back and pick up again, right? Sometimes you just need to give yourself those little mental breaks with it, because you find yourself just getting frustrated with trying to get it perfect, right? And so when that starts to happen to you, you take those breaks, give yourself a minute, refocus, and then come back to your drawing work. Ooh, pardon me. Sorry about that, little tickle in my throat. And you can start to see, you know, reflections of the objects you're drawing back in the glass, right? Like I can see the reflection of that pear. I can see, I can actually see a couple of grapes reflected in the glass below it. I can see, I've got a really strong highlight and reflection here. Kind of more middle value off to the side. Again, we'll go back for even more complexity than this with our eraser. our kneaded eraser and our pencil to create some more really rich values in there. Right now we're just kind of blocking in those basic form shadows that we see. Okay, now this gets quite a bit darker down here. No, and there will be occasionally areas that you go a little bit heavier than your 3 pressure, maybe to like a 4. But again, we're really just trying to figure out where those values are and the shape they are on the form. So stay focused on that middle for now. It will pay off in the end. You'll see why. And then there's a lot of still light value on that edge. And then it gets a little bit lighter middle down here. Okay, now I can see a little bit of this croissant reflected in the value shape as well. Comes right up to the edge of the reflection of the bowl of grapes and the grapes above it. So like right about here. And then see a little reflection there. Some darker middle down here. A little bit of a reflection on the under edge of this croissant. And now, of course, please take your time too, everyone, to pause this video as you need to. Don't feel like you have to go at my drawing pace, right? As you're doing some observation, take time to pause, really observe. And as I come down below here, where these 2 objects overlap, I see actually some pretty heavy dark value right down here at this bottom edge, this corner, this lip, the edge of the bottle. So I guess in that case, we will use some pretty firm pressure right at that bottom, right at that little bottom edge. And in the center here, I see some of those reflected grapes, but they turn into a really wacky, funny shape. So we'll shade what we see there. They get really distorted by the glass, by the curve of that glass. Right, kind of turns Funhouse Mirrors drawing on us. And then a bit of a darker behind there. And then this all just kind of has a nice soft middle tone all around it. Okay, cool. We have laid out our basic middle tones. Now it's time for us to do a little bit of smudging. We want to soften some of these pencil strokes. So you're going to gently use your blender. Your blender pressure is going to be around like a 1-2, right? Remember, if the firmest pressure we can create on our pencil is a 5, now we're going all the way to the other scale and the other end with a 1. And I just want you to gently, remember when you are blending, you are still drawing. It's not just smearing the pencil around. You are directing that graphite. So I want you to gently use your blender to create really nice, smooth value form shapes here, right? Those form shadow shapes. I'm not pressing hard. Notice how I'm also curving my blending stroke, particularly on this neck of the bottle where it flares out. Curving it down. Okay, I know that got a little bit darker. No worries, we're gonna go back in and use our eraser. Right, find some of those highlights, find some of those darker values. Same thing on the curve of these middle value shapes at the top. Curved, gentle blending stroke. You're just trying to get rid of some of that pencil texture. We want our glass to really feel nice and smooth, right? Sometimes in our drawing work, we're gonna really wanna maintain a pencil stroke, right? We might be attempting to create some really serious, texture. But in this case, with the glass being such a smooth, shiny surface, we actually wanna try to eliminate as much of that pencil stroke as we possibly can. And again, a delicate touch with your blending. You're not just smearing that pencil around. You're just trying to get rid of ever so delicately the pencil stroke. Oops. And if you over smudge like I just did, you just grab your kneaded eraser or your vinyl eraser. You go right back into it. Do just a little bit of a touch-up. Okay, there we go. Now I've softened some of my pencil stroke. Now it's time for me to go back in and really work for some of those darks and really work for some of those lights. So I'm actually going to take my eraser out of the sleeve. I always like to leave, I like to not work both ends of my eraser because I like to leave a sharp edge for detailed drawing as well as like a nice big soft edge for big erasing. I'm also going to be working with my kneaded eraser, my number 2 pencil, and my blender. Okay, so now if I just look specifically at like the neck of the bottle here, I can see I've got areas where I've got really rich shadow and also areas where I can get really beautiful highlights in there. So now I'm gonna be working with more of my like 4 pencil pressure to get my darks, and then I'm also gonna be drawing with my eraser to get some areas of light. Well, let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so as I look at the neck of the bottle, I can see I've got some more concentrated value right here in the center. So I'm gonna bring that pencil pressure to like a 4. So now I'm definitely pressing firmer. And it's not a 5, it's not like I'm creating a shadow, right? But it's definitely firmer than it was initially. And you can see that gets you that darker form shadow value. And so now I'm going in and I'm looking for those really concentrated areas of darker value in the glass. Remember, it's still going to be lighter though than what we would do for a cast shadow. This is still a light object. Now I'm also going to go in and look at that middle and look for areas where actually I have a little bit lighter value than just the middle of the glass. And I'm going to use my kneaded eraser to just pull out little tiny bits of that light value. Put in any other little areas of light in those sections. And then finally, I'll use just the corner of my kneaded eraser to really dress up and put in any remaining highlights I might want to see on the neck of the bottle there. Again, with drawing, folks, it just takes time and patience and practice. It really is all about the practice, everyone. Okay, and so there you can see the difference between where I go back in and I find those highlights and I darken some value. Let's move on down to the neck. Now, what's interesting about the neck of this bottle, as I look at it, it really doesn't need any more pencil work. It actually is going to need a bit more of my kneaded eraser. So I'm going to look for areas on the neck of that bottle where it's really quite light. It's quite light at the edge here. And so I don't lose the edge of the shoulder of my bottle. I'm going to use a little pencil to just put in some tone for what the value of that fabric will be behind it, just so I don't lose that edge. Just for now, just kind of as a placeholder. We'll go back and adjust its value as we draw the fabric. But for now, I just want to kind of, and I'm going to take my eraser. And this is called subtractive drawing, when we're drawing with our eraser and we're going back into some value we've put down to now create highlights and lovely, bright, light value shapes on our glass. All right, so this is where I can get in with my meters. I'm going to do the same thing on this far shoulder because I have this lovely sliver of light happening just on the outside edge of that shadow from the neck, and I want to make sure we can see it. The only way to get that is if I add some shading to the outside edge of the form. Remember, we don't want to outline because that's just going to flatten all that gorgeous shading work you just did. So do not outline. If you're having trouble seeing the edge of that bottle, add a little shading to the outside and give it a smudge. It's going to look so much more 3D, right? Because we're going for that illusion of dimension as we do that. I'm just going to give that a little smudge out there so I can see. There, do you see how that makes that shoulder of that bottle really pop out more? Yes, that's what we're going for. Okay, so now I'm doing some more kind of subtle shading in here. I'm going to get into the center and I want to start drawing in some really bright white highlights that I see happening on the glass. There's like kind of a clump of them right in the middle. I might just use, just to make sure they show up well, I might just use my blending stump. Just add a little bit of tone around the highlight to make sure there's enough contrast that I really see those bright, bright highlights on the top edge of the glass. Okay, as I move my way down, now I start to see some of those darker form shadows again, and I'm going to be bringing the pencil back into the game here. So as I continue to observe, I can see, yup, in the body of this glass, I've got some real rich areas of dark value. And then as you get more confident with it, start just naturally working back and forth between your pencil and capturing those darker values, right? And working with the subtractive method and capturing some more of those light values. I'm going to keep my focus right now on just the darker values as I work. I'm just looking for anywhere that I can add in maybe that more 4 type pencil pressure. And just keep kind of building back and forth. Between the values. Just working those darks, working those lights. Right, follow the curve and value of those shapes. Sorry if I ever pause, folks. It's just, this is like one of those like walking and chewing gum things. It's tough to shade and try to be thinking all at the same time. And now I'm just gonna start, again, just kind of looking my way back and forth into these different shapes. Getting those really beautiful glass reflections. Now this is actually a little bit subtler in tone, so I'm gonna keep this nice and bright. And this is definitely on this side a little bit lighter or a little bit more tone to it, a little bit darker in value. Right, and that's all I'm working back and forth between these darks and these lights. That's what I'm always looking back and forth to. Dark, light, dark, light. Is this lighter or darker than this other shape, right? And that's how you constantly create these kind of shades. Forms. There we go. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Move my way over here. And I've got some of this dark kind It fades and goes over into a light value, but then there's a lot of, I think, eraser work I can do in this highlight over here. So we'll give this some tone. We'll really get going in with the eraser on it. Right, and you can just see I'm just working back and forth between those darks and lights with the pencil. Okay, now over to the side, I start to get some more of those darker value shapes, so a bit heavier on the pencil pressure here and here. And it gets softer, a little bit less heavy on this edge here where I've got some highlights happening more, and then this becomes just much more of a neutral kind of middle gray. And this is pretty bright in here. And I've got some pretty bright highlights, you know, here and here. A little tiny one like right here. This shape of this highlight isn't quite right either. That goes more kind of out this way. And you're always just observing kind of like what looks right, what needs an adjustment. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's all right. That's what this observational drawing stuff is constantly observing back and forth, back and forth. Does that look right? Does that not look right? Now, again, same thing happening on my shoulders over on this side. I've got this really bright highlight coming down the side of the glass. So I'm gonna take my pencil, I'm gonna add some value, some tone, kind of like a 3 pressure to the outside edge of the glass here. And again, we can go back, and when we shade the fabric in the background, we'll do adjustments there. But I just want to be able to see that really nice highlight. And I don't want to outline it because all that will do is just flatten all my beautiful shading work. So I'm certainly not going to do that. I'm just going to adjust the value so they see the edge of that glass there. Okay, and now I'm just going to kind of keep working my way kind of down and over, I think. And I'm just carefully observing, you know, dark, middle, light value, dark, middle, light. Now I want everybody to take heart. This is 100% the hardest object to draw, I believe, in this whole drawing because of its complexity, because of its shape, because of all the, you know, the reflection. Oh my gosh, you name it. Drawing glass is hard. You know, you did not imagine that. Drawing glass is 100% difficult. So good on you. We're getting the hard one done first, and then everything else after this is going to seem just a little bit easier. Just a little bit. You can see particularly in the pear, there's some pretty good, you know, darker values happening within that object as well, or within that reflection as well. And it comes up. And in and around the shapes that these grapes are. Okay, and now as we come over to this kind of final side and I work my way over, we start to, you know, it simplifies a little bit. It's not as, you know, insanely complex. I see, you know, just like little window details and reflections. It's not quite as wild. Okay, and I'm just gonna bring this shading to a close on the right hand side of this bottle here. Same thing, I'm just looking for those, you know, darker middle and light values. A lot of good hard shading work today. Okay, and then same thing on this outside edge where I have a lot of light meeting here. I don't want to leave that hard line. I'm just going to take my pencil and add a bit more shading to the outside edge. And there it is all. Ta-da! We have a beautifully completed bottle. All right, so join me in our next video, okay, for our croissant. We're going to continue to work our way down this page. Great drawing in the art room with you today, y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.